The first day, first of all, I remember getting on the plane, and I want to say we left at like 6 in the morning. No, we left at like 4 in the morning. See, 6 in the morning is early for me now. In the mission field, that's normal. So it was like 4 in the morning. I was tired. It was dark outside. We hopped on a bus, and then we flew to Rochester. We stopped in Detroit along the way. And by the time we got to Rochester, it was already, almost the evening. And now I served in Rochester, New York, which is upstate. It's Palmyra is in this mission. The Hill Cumorah is in this mission. It's just a lot of special places in this mission. I didn't really realize how lucky I was to be going to, currently the oldest mission, where the gospel's been taught continuously. And the first thing that we do is our mission president would take us to all the sites. So the Book of Mormon publication site, the Sacred Grove, the Hill Cumorah. He would take us to some special sites, the grave site of Alvin Smith. And I just remember how surreal it was. I kind of just never thought about like the home of Joseph Smith and the origin of Joseph Smith. I think really to me he was almost like a mythical, like he was someone I believed in, kind of. Like it was almost like some story that we talked about but never actually really happened. And so to go and see, the real gravesite of Alvin Smith, and to see the real city of Palmyra where there's so many different Christian religions, and to know that all of that was real. What we read at like primary, young men's, priesthood, young women's, all of those things all really happened. The life of Joseph Smith is real. What people tell us is real, and there's more history that you don't learn about, at church that's deeper that I got to learn because I was in Palmyra, and it was really, really cool. But I remember just being exhausted and, being like, man, I don't even think this is real. And that night, we go home after seeing the sights, and my mission president, after dinner, gathered us all around, and he's like, all right, who's ready to find out which areas they're going to go to tomorrow, and who their trainer's going to be? Who your trainer's going to be didn't really matter because we don't know anything about them. It could be anybody, and it wouldn't matter to us because we just didn't know them. But I remember the 4 areas you could go to if you were an elder that were open was inner city Rochester, Batavia, which was kind of out in the country, and Palmyra was one. I can't remember the other one, but it was Warsaw, which is also in the country. And I just remember thinking, like, man, I want to go inner city Rochester. That sounds like the biggest adventure. It's like the stories they were telling us about it sounded like it was pretty dangerous there. And like, I just wanted to get these cool adventure stories. Remember, my uncles had always told me about what an adventure their mission was. And that's what I wanted. More than the spiritual stuff, I wanted to say that like we got shot at or something crazy. And really, I just didn't want to go to Palmyra. That was the biggest one too. I was like, man, Palmyra is like another Utah. It's just another, the church is probably really big there, and, everyone's going to be, pretty much think that it's cute that I'm in Palmyra, and I just wasn't up for that. Well, of course, that's where my first area is. I go to Palmyra, and everyone was jealous. Everyone's like, what? Like, oh, you're so lucky. We wanted to go to Palmyra. And I faked it. I was like, oh, yeah, dude, it's so sweet. Like, I'm so glad I get to go. But deep down, that's not where I wanted to go. But I learned my first day in the field with my trainer that it's not another Utah in Palmyra, and that I didn't learn in the first day how lucky I was to go, but I did learn that it wasn't It wasn't Mormonville there. It's not like a cute area to be in. It's real missionary work. And I think, I say another Utah. I think Utah has real missionary work too, and it's not, I don't mean to take that lightly at all. I think wherever the Lord calls us to serve, there's real miracles and real experiences waiting to happen that are precious, and not, I don't think that, if you went somewhere crazy and exotic, it would be any cooler than if you went to Utah. You're going to have the same experiences of working side by side with the Savior. And I think that that's, kind of what I learned as well in Palmyra, that I was still getting the same mission experience that I wanted going to that area. So that was kind of my first day. That's what it was like. So the Rochester mission went from, it's either Cayuga Lake or Seneca Lake. I want to say it's Cayuga Lake is one boundary. So that's one of the Finger Lakes, and that's in western New York. I always say upstate New York, but really western New York is a better way to describe the boundaries. And that takes you all the way to Canada on the north. Niagara Falls was included in that mission. Lake Ontario is a boundary. It doesn't include any other states. I remember they said it was one of the smallest geographic missions in the church. I can't remember which one. There was a few that are smaller. Like I know there's one in LA that's smaller, and Temple Square is obviously smaller. But, it wasn't a huge mission. Part of that was that we had sites. So a lot of our sister missionaries couldn't spend a lot of time proselyting. They had to work shifts at the sites. And so for the amount of missionaries we had, it wasn't, I guess, didn't work very well. Have a huge mission for all these missionaries to cover, because most of our sisters needed to be close to Palmyra so they could work the sites. So it ends up being a smaller mission. But there's a lot to New York. I think, Rochester is a city, and it's a lot like probably any other city. Has its special things about it, its unique things. But it's a city, has a lot of people. It's open-minded, I guess. If you know how cities are. They're just a little more diverse as far as like cultures and races. But what I thought was really interesting about Palmyra is that Palmyra is really diverse amongst Christian religions. I felt like serving there was the most diverse Christian place. Like most people, doors I would knock on, they'd be Christian. I did have one guy answer the door and tell me he was a born-again atheist. And that was pretty funny, but I didn't know how to respond to that, so I just kind of said, "Oh, well, we offered to teach him." That's he didn't really want any of it, but you just had a lot of different kinds of Christians. One of the famous landmarks in Palmyra is called the Four Corners Churches, where you have the Episcopalian Church, the Methodist Church, the Baptist Church, and there's a Catholic church there as well, as a Presbyterian church. So the Catholic church is actually behind one of the churches. So there's 5 churches right on this intersection, one church on every corner, and it just really illustrated, what it was like for Joseph Smith. The confusion, there's so many choices, and sometimes you just don't want so many choices. You want to just kind of know what you're supposed to do and not have to always figure it out. But that was always really interesting to me. You never knew what you were going to get when you knocked on a door. And, for the most part, people were really friendly. But you still had some people that were bitter against Mormons, which in Palmyra is a really interesting, it blows your mind that people don't like Mormons there, because it's such a small town and it has all these businesses, and the biggest time of the year for these businesses is when the pageant rolls around. So many Mormons come in. All the hotels fill up. There's just, every restaurant has lines coming out, because there's so many people in this little town. And as soon as pageant's over, it dies down immensely. But even then, the visitors that come when it's not pageant, they're coming to see the sacred grove. They're coming to see the Book of Mormon publication site. And, so it always blew my mind that you had this town that was pretty much supported by Mormons financially. And they, a large portion of them still hated Mormons. It was just a really interesting thing to see. But I felt, in some ways you feel what it might have felt like a little bit for Joseph Smith and for the early missionaries. No one was ever threatening my life, but to just know that people rejected them. In that part of the country they were rejected, and I got to feel what it was like to be rejected. I also got to feel what it was like to have success as well. I don't want it to sound like it was just a big festival of people telling me no, but it was really cool to feel the same thing that Joseph Smith might have felt at times, when people throw stuff out at us from their car, or, when they yell at us and tell us we're dumb or make fun of us. It was just it was cool to me, to be like, wow. I kind of really got to realize what Joseph Smith must have gone through to proclaim the gospel. For him, he didn't want the adventure, it wasn't like he wanted people to know that he went to prison as much as he just wanted the gospel to go forth. And he just did what was necessary. And I don't know. I think that's where the best adventure comes from, is when you have a purpose and you just do what's necessary. You don't look for adventure, it comes to you with the journey of what you're doing, I guess. It just, I don't know. It's really cool. So the church size, there's a temple in Palmyra. It's just a little temple. Really cool. It faces, there's a spot in the temple where they have a window that looks out into the sacred grove. And it's as far as unit sizes go, I was always in the Rochester steak and the Palmyra steak. I never went to the Buffalo steak, but I do know there's branches that are small as like 30 people in the branch going to church. I was always in wards that were pretty much almost as big as a Utah ward. The amount of geography that they would cover was a lot bigger. I still think my last area, the ward that I covered, would have been at least 3 or 4 stakes. Could be as much as 10 stakes in Utah. I mean, it covered 3 different towns and part of the city of Rochester. So it was, really geographically, the ward boundaries are a lot bigger out there, and the amount of people that make up a ward, it's just not as dense as Utah. I know that no one expects it to be, but every once in a while when you think of the difference and the comparison, it's crazy that you could fit multiple stakes in this one ward. But I did, I had a lot of cool experiences with church history while I was out there as well. There's a site that's not as well known. It's the baptismal spot of Brigham Young. And, we had the chance to go out there, and it's just this tiny creek. I don't know what I would compare it to, but, it's probably this big. There's not a lot of water running through there. And it blew my mind that they used to dam that up and baptize people there. Brigham Young was baptized, just right by his ranch in Mendon. And that, you learn how much of a hard worker Brigham Young was as well as Joseph Smith. That these guys were not lazy at all. They earned every bit of respect that they got. There's a city called Canandaigua. It's just really a beautiful city in New York. It's right on one of the Finger Lakes. And I remember when I got there, the roads were really wide, which is not I don't think it's an Eastern United States thing, period, but it wasn't. Most of New York was not like that. The roads were really narrow, trees, on the sides of all the roads. And these roads were really wide. I remember asking the member that was driving us through this particular city, like, why are the roads so wide here? I feel like I'm back home, I feel like I'm in Utah again. And he's like, this city was actually planned by Brigham Young. So these roads are wide enough that you could turn a wagon around in the road back in the day. And they were graphed, they were like straight roads going through the city, which is kind of a Utah thing as well. And it just kind of blew my mind that before Brigham Young was a prophet, before he was an apostle, he was still working so hard. He was still an innovator. He was like the type of man that the Lord chose for an apostle. Was not, he didn't choose some lazy, he wasn't like a lucky guy that got to be the new leader. Like, he had to prove himself to the Lord that he was a hard worker. And there's evidence of it all through New York. There's just a lot of interesting things like that. There's the Martin Harris home there, and it's not that big of a house, but I remember them telling me that this was, like a mansion back in the day. It was a cobblestone house, really a beautiful home. And, there's sites that people just don't really see that often. It's weird that you have these sites right there, but the Sacred Grove is kind of so big that the people pass up the Brigham Young baptismal site and they pass up the Martin Harris home. But it really is cool being there and feeling, what I guess the birthplace of the church, what it feels like and what it must have been like for the early members of the church. The green, really green, hot and humid summers, but beautiful fall. The perfect seasons. Like, it had a winter with snow, it had a summer that was hot, it had fall with all the changing colors in the leaves. And I just always would imagine Joseph Smith in the winter and what it would be like freezing. But seeing those movies, I felt like I was in these movies that the church had made of Joseph Smith and Brigham Young when they were first learning about the church and when it was being restored. And it's really cool. Another thing is Palmyra is really, the adversary is strong there too. There's, you're familiar with the first vision when, before he saw the vision, he was attacked. His tongue was bound. He almost wasn't able to get his prayer out. It's just Satan tried so hard to stop him. Well, there's evidence of that in Palmyra as well. There's a lot of stories we would hear about spiritualism, or people, would sacrifice their cats on altars and just crazy. I don't want to go too deep into any of that stuff, but there's the other side as well working, and I didn't even really know that it was real, that people got into that kind of thing, and that there was like evil in an organization. But there was that as well in Palmyra, and it was really interesting. Like, the whole story of Joseph Smith kind of unravels in real life when you're there. You see that it all is really real. So I served from January of 2012 to January of 2014. And I started in Palmyra for 6 months. Now, I say Palmyra, but that's really the Palmyra ward. They called us Palmyra elders, but we served in Marion, Williamson, and Ontario, New York, and Walworth. All just little towns, cute little towns that your wife would want to live in when you grow up. I don't know. After that, I went to Pittsford, New York. That's kind of the wealthy suburb of Rochester. just completely changed from Palmyra. You just had everything was really nice in Pittsford. And I was there for 6 months as well, and I loved it there. And then I went to the Rochester 4th Ward, which is kind of the southwestern part of the city. And that covered Rochester, that covered Gates, and a city called Chili, which is spelled chili. But they just, kind of like how we say hurricane here, they would say Chili. And they had a city called Lima, but they called it Lima. And it's funny, we used to always joke about that. But I was only there for 3 months. And that was kind of what I always wanted before my mission, of like the scary, like people robbing you, or, just, I don't know, adventure, And I was never really in like a sticky situation. I just felt there were places that were scary, or like people would tell us like that it wasn't safe where we were at, but it never actually got dangerous. But it was that adventure I want. And then my last area I served in for 10 months, and it was the northwestern part of Rochester. And then it also covered a city called Irondequoit and a city called Webster. And I love that area. I wanted to stay there. I got to stay there. I was there for 10 months. I really got to know it. And I had a portion of the city that was the same, like it was really rough. We'd hear gunshots. We never saw any shooting or anything. It wasn't really that dangerous. But you'd hear rough stories. Or there was one time when we knocked on a door to see this lady that had been less active, and she wasn't there, but there was these 3 guys out there playing cards, and we asked them, where the sister was, if she was home, or if they knew where she had gone. And they just were really kind of creepy about it. They were like, oh, she's over on Lyle. And Lyle is like, it's kind of famous. There's like a nut house on Lyle, a mental ward or something, and there's like a strip club place. And so, I was just kind of really worried what had happened to this lady, if she ended up, got desperate and went to the strip club, or if she, had lost her mind or something. It was really a bad part of town that we were in. And then I remember these guys looked at us and they were like, "What? It's really courageous of you white boys to be here in this neighborhood." And at this point, I knew I was safe as a missionary, and I really believed and knew that we had the protection of the Spirit, and I wasn't going to go do something stupid, but I also just really wasn't afraid of like being in the ghetto and being the only white guy, And they told us like, "Hey, if the guy upstairs sees you, he'll kill you because you're white." And that was like the first time that anyone had ever threatened us like with serious harm. And it was kind of, the adventure. I was like, sweet, we've been threatened. But I just remember telling the guy like that wouldn't be good for him. We're representatives of Jesus Christ, and that would not be good for him if he did that. Looking back, I don't think I would ever say that to someone. I would probably just run away now. But it was really cool feeling safe and feeling the strength of the Spirit and knowing that you walked with power as a missionary, and being able to just tell people like, no, I'm not worried that you say that guy upstairs is going to kill me, because I know that he can't. Like, I know that would be worse for him. And and I remember there was people out drinking one time, and drunk people can be hard on you if you're a missionary. You just don't know what they're going to do. They can be friendly, they can be mean. And the one guy was like, "Are you going to come tell me to stop drinking?" They're like, yeah, I am. I was like, put that down, like, stop drinking. That's not good for you. And now I'd probably just be like, you can do what you want, but as a missionary, I loved that feeling of, I knew what was true, and I wasn't afraid to admit it. I wasn't afraid. I knew that God was with me, and I still believe that the missionaries walk with the Spirit, and they can do amazing things, and they can, with full faith, tell people the truth. They don't ever have to run from anything or slouch on their values. They can just tell it how it is, and the Lord will protect them. And there's bad things that happen to missionaries. They're not, you're not completely safe. If you do something stupid, you can get hurt, or you can be unlucky. But I think that the Lord has a plan for that as well. And I don't know, until you do it, you just don't know the experience. Until you're a missionary and you know what it's like to walk with the Spirit and the safety that name tag gives you, that bearing Jesus Christ's name gives you. It's just a unique experience. And on the same side, I'll say shame just because it's in the scriptures. It doesn't actually give you shame. But there's a scripture that talks about, how lucky we are to be counted to suffer shame for the name of Jesus Christ. And you do that as well, You don't get a dress in what you think is cool clothes. You wear missionary attire. You wear the suit and the tie. You don't get to listen to the music that you think is cool. You listen to what's approved. And if people are mean to you, you have to be humble about it. You have to just take the shame, so to speak. And you love that too, though. You just love being, having the name of Jesus Christ and knowing that it's not you that they're persecuting him, and that you're there with him. You're standing with Jesus Christ rather than standing with the world and pointing the finger. And I love it. One thing about people in upstate New York and probably the East in general is they're kind of a lot more straightforward than Western people, Growing up in Utah, people are really nice. At least, they're really polite in front of you. They might not like you, they might like you, but usually, to your face and in front of you, they're just going to be nice. They're just going to make it work. And that, I liked that. When I went to New York, though, people were really honest. Sometimes they would say things that would be kind of hard for me to hear, but ultimately I learned that I kind of prefer that. Like, I kind of really like honesty, and I think it taught me to be honest. I was really, and still probably am, really nervous to tell people the full truth if I think it's going to hurt them. I was definitely worse before my mission, but I've learned that the truth just helps people. Everyone wants to hear the truth, whether it hurts or not. And you don't have to be hurtful the way you use it, but it's better to just be straight with people and be straight with the things you say, and not like you don't need to always make people feel good. If there's something that they need to hear, tell them. And if there's something that you need to hear, you want to be told. It's better to feel awkward for a day or to feel bad about it for a day, but then be able to fix it, than it is to just not know what's happening. Not knowing is worse than any of that. So I think honesty is one of the big life lessons I learned. Don't be afraid, to hurt people's feelings every once in a while, not to be mean, but say things that might be kind of hard to hear. Because if you really love someone, you're not going to lie to them. You're not going to just tell them sweet things that make them feel good. Every once in a while, you're going to tell them the hard things that help them grow. That's true. That was true for investigators, which I think is one of the hardest ones, because they're kind of hard to come by in New York, and you don't want to lose them. But they appreciate the truth a heck of a lot more than, sweet lies. Like they want the truth. They want you to actually care about them. And so that's kind of the life lesson I learned, yeah. Another story, another reason why missions are great and, why they're really important. Yeah, I always wanted the adventure, and the adventure is great, but it's these stories, these experiences that are really, in my mind, the adventure. When you get to see the hand of God work in people's lives. So we were teaching in my area that I was in for 10 months. When I first got to that area, I remember my companion and I were being somewhat disobedient. We were kind of slacking on the schedule. We would sleep in for 30 minutes, just things that I thought were little things, but I also knew that I wasn't giving it my full 100%. And I remember the mission president came one night and was talking to my companion, because my companion was having a hard time. And he knew, he knew why we were having a hard time. He knew it's because we weren't being 100% obedient. And so we made the resolve, we're going to be fully obedient from here on out. We're going to work hard. We're going to make the most out of our missions. And that next day was like probably the hardest day of my mission. I remember thinking like, wow, God is punishing me for working hard. Like now that I've made this resolve, he wants it to be hard. And, we tried to visit less actives, and we only caught one at home. And he was actually from Utah, and, showed us he had a Book of Mormon that Phineas Young used to own that was signed by Phineas Young and, other family members from the Young family. And he's just a really old Book of Mormon. It was really cool. But basically he was like, I really don't want anything to do with the church. I have this Book of Mormon because I think it's a cool, cool heirloom to have. But I just really don't believe in the church, is what he said. And, and I could get the feeling that he came to New York to run away from the church, and that really we were wasting our time and to try and stay there. And that's pretty much what he told us as well, So we left that house, and we would always tract, 5 houses down in each direction after we'd visit a less active. We called it 5x5ing. So we 5x5'd a different house, and I remember we met this lady, and she was like interested. She was like, yeah, come back another day. But it was just one of those things, where you get it a lot as a missionary. Well, people will tell you to come back, but they really just want you to get off their doorstep. So, at the end of the day, I was like, man, we got one lady that wanted us off her doorstep, and so she told us to come back. And we had a less active who was just never coming back. And so 6 months down the road, that lady that we tracked it into ends up being really solid. And she would have us over for dinner all the time, and we would teach her, and she just really was one of the most sincere people I ever taught on my mission. And she's still investigating. She's really, I guess, honest about it. She wasn't just going to get baptized to make us happy. She just really wanted to know if it was true. But nonetheless, she was sincere. I knew that was from God that we ran into her. Well, as we were going to visit her one day, 6 months later, we were a half hour early, and we didn't have any real plans besides tracting. And just kind of came into my head that we should go visit this less active that was really, kind of anti, seemingly, and really didn't want anything to do with the church. And the only reason I could think that we should go see him is that he was a nice guy. It won't be a complete waste of our time if we talk to him. I mean, he's not going to come back, but he's friendly. He is friendly. So we went and we knocked on the door, and I remember he didn't answer the door. Someone else did. But the person who answered the door went and got him. And when he came to the door, he just kind of looked stunned on his face. And he was like, "Why are you here?" And I was kind of terrified, because I knew that he wasn't really interested, and I was ready for him to just blow up at us. And, it doesn't hurt you, but I just didn't want it. I don't want to be chewed out by this guy. So I'm like, here we go. And I just told him the truth. I was like, you're just, like, we thought you were friendly, and we just want to stop in and check up on you, see how you're doing. It's been a while. And he's like, "Why don't you come back? Come to the backyard." So we came to the backyard, and we started talking to him, and he told us that he went home to Utah for the last month. And that he was actually pretty nice, which was really weird for me to hear him say that. I was ready for him to say they're hypocrites out there or say something negative. But he said, "No, it's really nice." And he said, "My mom actually passed away. I went home to see my mom before she passed on." He said she got a blessing, and it was really nice. He's like, and the whole experience was good, And so we said, I knew it was a miracle. My companion at the time had never met him, and to him it was just kind of a normal, like somebody went home to Utah and it was kind of nice, but they're not going to come back to the church. But I knew the change, so I can't remember really where we went from there. I asked him if he wanted to come back to church with us, and that it was similar at church. He could feel the same things at church, and he said yes, and we were really surprised. And he started reading the Book of Mormon. We were really surprised. And I remember later on we were at a ward party, and at this point he's pretty much active. He'd been coming to church. He's been reading the scriptures, really putting more into the church than I ever had before my mission. He was so stalwart. And another missionary was talking to him about, how cool it was that he had come back to the church. And he's like, "Well, yeah, the story is really interesting." I said, "I went home and saw my mom pass away. But one of the last things that my mom told me, or that I said to my mom, was, I said, 'Mom, I know that you really love the church,'" because his mom was really strong in the gospel. And he said, "I know you really love it. I just don't believe it. I really do not believe that the church is true. But if it is true, if you get to the other side and it really is real, somehow give me a sign, and I'll do that for you. If it's true, I'll do it for you." Well, he comes home, and he's gave his mom somewhat of a chance. He got on Facebook, and he joined an LDS discussion group. But it was kind of one of those discussion groups where they talk more about, what's going to happen before the second coming, more than just basic doctrines, And he was kind of getting upset with some of the things they were saying. It was things that were people's speculation, and he did not agree with the things that they were saying. He was getting a little upset about it, and he was about ready to just give it up again. And then one of the people in this discussion group says, "Hey, I actually sense that you're, actually really interested in learning more about the church or coming back to the church. This group is not where you should be. You should talk to missionaries." And that's when we rung the doorbell. It was at that same moment, I guess. He read that, and then we came to the door. And that's why when we came to the door, he was like, "Why are you here?" It's not because he was ready to blow up or because it was weird for him. He was, kind of freaked out by what had happened, and he knew that was his mom. And but it's interesting how the Spirit works. That's one thing I learned from a mission. A lot of times the Spirit is just, you think it's you. You think it just feels like a good idea. Like, hey, that seems like the right thing to do. Let's just do that. That seems like a nice thing to do for somebody. Well, often you're being led. Often just those simple feelings to do good is the Spirit telling you, this is important. I need you here. And yeah, to me, that made it all worth it, to be able to go on a mission and find someone who when I met him, I knew he was never going to come back. I knew he was a lost cause. And now he's very active in the church. And, he's saved by the gospel. I know that Jesus Christ loves his children, and that even when you kick against the pricks, even when you turn against the church and you run from it, you move away from it just to get away from it because you hate it, he still loves you, and if he can, he'll find a way to bring you back. We had a hurricane. Hurricane Sandy came through. But I wouldn't say that's most extreme weather. It was supposed to be really serious, and every time, probably outside of Utah, but every time in New York, if there's a big weather warning coming, the stores would be empty. People would buy all the food and all the water. And I remember the hurricane was pretty crazy for that. Everyone bought up on water. But really, snow, I thought, was the biggest experience. It got down to -32 one time. And it was just cold like I've never experienced or imagined you can feel. And I know it gets colder other places, but it was cold. It was crazy. So we were driving, and we saw something in the road, and we stopped. It was a snapping turtle, and it was about yay big. It was a pretty good sized turtle, and just slowly walked across. It had a tail that looked like Bowser. It's really cool. And a lot of dead possums and wild hedgehogs. And then there's the average things that are here in Utah, deer, things like that. But yeah, it was cool. I had Puerto Rican food. This actually had a restaurant, so I don't feel like I have to, make any members feel weird about their cooking. Yeah, but it was just, they had things like oxtail and tongue and stuff, which is, there's crazier foods, but, to me that was pretty exotic. And I didn't really want anything exotic. I just wanted some good Spanish food. And I was thinking Mexican, I was like, this looks like a great Mexican restaurant. Well, it's Spanish food, and that's not the same as Mexican. And so I just got beef and pork. And I remember eating the pork, and there was just they just left the skin on it. You'd have chunks of pork, but there'd be skin and fat and cartilage and stuff. And so even getting what I thought was the most normal food was it's still very different from if we were to have pork here at a Mexican restaurant where it's just meat. It's there's skin, and there's hairs coming out of the skin. And I was like, man, this is not Mexican food that I want. But it's still good, It tasted good. It was just different. So I don't want to say they're famous for their pizza, because they're amongst New York. Their pizza's not really that good, I guess. But I thought their pizza was awesome. They had awesome pizza. There's a place in Palmyra called Nima's, and their calzones are just giant calzones that are awesome. I mean, they cook them for you fresh. So you crack open this, looks like a pie almost, or like a huge empanada. You crack it open, it's full of cheese and pepperoni, and it's just so good. And then the staple, though, is called a garbage plate. That's only Rochester has garbage plates. You go to Buffalo, no garbage plates. You go to Syracuse, no garbage plates. So it's really just in this one city where they have the garbage plate, but it's basically potatoes, mac salad, beans, and then they put 2 cheeseburger patties on top of that, and they drip this meat sauce over it. The meat sauce is a Rochester thing too. I mean, I just never saw it in Utah. It's like ground beef that is really, really fine, so that it turns into a sauce, and it's hot, it's spicy, and it was good. It was all good. My favorite, though, is probably the calzone at Nemo's. As far as baptisms go, stateside missions are, for lack of a better term, hard, I guess. Most people don't baptize 30 people in a stateside mission. New York, I think the average was 1.7. like for a missionary. And I had this awesome experience where I prayed to God and I told him I was ready to be serious as a missionary about the work and that I really wanted to find somebody that was ready. And the next day I found this girl. She was a referral. And we called her and she was solid. She was really cool experience how she found the church, really cool experience with her conversion to the church. And she got baptized. And it was just like, one of those answers to your prayers where you're like, whoa, that was such a clear answer to my prayer. I asked for it and it just happened. And then I left the area and she also moved to a different area of New York in a different ward. And the transition just didn't go very well. Her family, I think, wasn't very supportive. And she left the church, like right after she joined, she left. And what I learned is that's really hard. Like it's really hard to see someone that knows it's true. They have a testimony from what they've told you and what you've felt as they've shared things with you. And to see them turn that away, because of fear or, I'm not entirely sure what it was. Could have been her family. It could have been issues, things that were a commandment that was too hard. It could have been the lack of support. I don't know, but what I learned is that retention is just as important. Once you've been baptized or once someone else has been baptized, that's not over, and it's a continual process. You should never stop worrying about someone. You should never stop helping someone, even if they are active. We have to help each other out, not just the non-members, and I don't know. I felt like I learned that because she was solid, and I think I kind of just thought my work was done. I went to a new area. If I could go back, I would have done more. I still think she probably would have left, but that was hard, and I learned from it, I think. I packed a lot of like thermal underwear. And if I could go back, I would only pack one pair of those. You hardly ever will wear them, even if it's freezing. The thing is, like, it's warm, but as soon as you go inside to someone's house, they're too hot. So with that, just don't worry too much about, like, thermals. Get a nice coat. I always was kind of, like, going cheap on the coats. And shouldn't have, I guess. It's worth the money to spend money on a coat. It's worth the money to spend money on shoes. Find good quality shoes. Or, you can even go to a thrift store and find good quality old shoes that'll last you. But you just don't want to be buying shoes every couple months. And you will wear them out like that. I don't feel like I walked that much on my mission. And I still was wearing shoes out a lot. If they're not a nice pair of shoes, they don't hold up from walking. But I would say that's the big thing is warmth. Get a nice coat. If you can get the ones that have like a outer raincoat shell and they like attach together, that's a good one. Because some days it's really cold, some days it's kind of cold, and that way you can kind of layer. And yeah, the rest of it, is just like style things. If you like short sleeve shirts, I always like the short sleeve shirts in the summer. If you like comfortable pants, but really I think the most important thing is just spend money on a good coat and good shoes. So I don't know where you're being called for your mission. I don't know if you have your call yet. And I don't know how you feel about your mission call. But what I do know is that the mission is a mission for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is an experience you can get nowhere else. I know that you won't regret it if you do it. Really, I think it's the best thing I've done in my life was to serve a mission. Going to Rochester, I wasn't excited about my mission call. I wanted to go foreign. I always wanted to go foreign. And I wanted the adventure of South America or Africa. And, it was hard for me to be motivated and to be excited for it. But returning from Rochester, I now really know that God wanted me to be there. I now know that I still got the adventures that I wanted, that I learned things that I could have learned nowhere else, and that when people say, you go where you're supposed to go, your mission is your mission and you'll love it and you're meant to go there, that's really true. It really is true. The things that you'll learn on a mission about serving people, about following the Spirit, I think that, to me, that's the biggest thing, is learning how to follow the Spirit and the miracles that come from the Spirit and the power that gives you is so priceless. You'll never, I guess I shouldn't say you'll never have an opportunity like that, but you will never regret the opportunity to be able to rely on the Spirit. I know that there's people out there that were meant just for me that I was able to talk to. I know there's people that are out there that are meant just for you. I know that Jesus Christ saves. He's called the Savior for a reason. And not only is He the path and the way, but He is your advocate, He's your rescuer, and that He has a plan for you. When we trip and we fall, He provides a way for us to get back up again. When you give up on yourself, when you lose faith, He is always there trying to get you back up again, to give you the hope again, to build you up, because He knows things about us that we don't know. I know on a mission is one of the best ways to learn that. You can see firsthand that Jesus Christ will lift you. And you can see firsthand that He loves you even though you have shortcomings, and that He will allow you to be powerful in His name and to be a messenger and a representative for Him even though you have shortcomings. That He loves you even though you have shortcomings. I know that He's there and He's ready to help you. And I just say that, if you don't need to go on a mission so that you can grow up and become a man. You don't need to go on a mission so you can get married. You don't need to go on a mission so that you can overcome, issues of sin, of irresponsibility. You need to go on a mission because you can't afford to miss out on the experiences that you will have. It's really not about, the saving you from bad things ahead, although it probably will do that. It's about the great things that it offers. It really is the biggest blessing. And I leave that with you in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.